What if I told you that a 2,000-year-old chunk of corroded bronze, dragged up from the bottom of the Mediterranean, could rewrite everything we thought we knew about ancient technology? This isn't a story about myths or conspiracy theories. It's about a very real, very mechanical device, one so advanced it shouldn't even exist. Not in that time, not in that world, not with the tools they had, but they built it, and it worked. This thing could track the movements of the sun, moon, and planets with eerie precision, predicted eclipses, mimicked the cosmos, and maybe, just maybe, whispered the secrets of a lost civilization. The experts tried to ignore it, but the machine wouldn't stay quiet. And once you see what it can do, you won't either. Back in 1901, a group of sponge divers were out looking for sea sponges off the coast of Antikythera in Greece. What they found instead? A sunken Roman shipwreck, and inside statues, pottery, coins, and a small lump of metal rusted to the bone. First, it looked like nothing, just another artifact too damaged to care about. But decades later, when X-rays finally pierced its corroded shell, the truth exploded open. Inside that lump was a mind-bending network of gears, hand-carved, microscopic, and precisely arranged to map out the heavens. This wasn't art. It was a machine. They called it the Antikythera mechanism, and it was unlike anything else in recorded history. In fact, it still is. Think about this. If a device this advanced existed over 2,000 years ago, what does that say about the people who built it? Or the world that came before ours? Or the forgotten knowledge we've yet to uncover? Maybe this isn't just a glitch in the historical timeline. Maybe it's a clue, a breadcrumb left behind, one we were never meant to find. Sometimes history hides in the most unexpected places. Picture this: a group of sponge divers off the coast of Antikythera in Greece, back in 1901. They weren't looking for treasure, just sea sponges. But as one of them dives deeper, something glints beneath the sand, partly covered in coral, partly broken apart. What they pulled from the ocean floor looked like nothing more than rusted bronze. No one could have guessed that this corroded chunk would later shake the very foundations of what we think we know about ancient technology. It didn't sparkle. It didn't scream importance. It sat quiet, like a secret waiting to be remembered. And yet, that day, something forgotten resurfaced. Something that didn't belong in the world we thought we understood. At first, archaeologists treated it like any other shipwreck artifact. The statues and coins drew more attention. After all, they were easier to classify, easier to show off in museums. But this odd, gear-like piece, it sat ignored for decades, slowly degrading, collecting dust in a back room of the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. It was almost like history wanted it to stay hidden a little longer, as if the Antikythera mechanism wasn't ready to speak just yet. For years, researchers walked past it, unaware they were brushing shoulders with what many now believe is the earliest known analog computer. And the crazy part? It could have stayed forgotten forever if not for a twist of curiosity that no one saw coming. It wasn't until decades later that someone finally looked at it with new eyes. Dr. Spiridon Stays, a Greek archaeologist, noticed something odd on its surface: tiny gear teeth, almost too precise for something so old. That was the spark. That was the moment everything began to unravel. It didn't take long before whispers of impossible artifact started circling among scholars. Could a 2,000-year-old object really contain gear systems more advanced than anything seen until the 18th century? Could this lost civilization have had knowledge that modern science had no clue existed back then? That's when the idea of the Antikythera mechanism as more than a mystery began to take root. It wasn't just a relic anymore, it was a challenge. Now imagine standing in that museum storage room, pulling open a drawer and seeing what looks like a shattered clock face, bronze fragments with faint inscriptions, hidden between bits of coral, you'd probably pass it off as debris. And yet, beneath that corrosion sat a message from the past, one that would take over 100 years to decode. That's the thing with ancient technology. It doesn't always announce itself with grandeur. Sometimes it waits quietly, stubbornly, until someone finally asks the right question. And that's exactly what happened. The Antikythera mechanism didn't shout. It whispered, and only a few were listening. There's something poetic about the fact that it was found in a shipwreck. A lost object from a lost civilization, literally buried at sea, guarded by time and tide. It makes you wonder how many other fragments of truth are sitting at the bottom of oceans or buried under layers of earth, dismissed because they don't fit the story we've been told. This wasn't just a discovery, it was a disruption. It cracked open a timeline that had seemed set in stone. And it reminded us of something deeply uncomfortable. Maybe we don't know our own past as well as we think we do. Maybe history's biggest secrets are hiding in plain sight. And just like that, a chunk of metal that no one wanted to touch became the centerpiece of a global investigation. Scholars, engineers, astronomers, they all wanted a piece of the puzzle. The Antikythera mechanism, once forgotten, was now being scanned, reconstructed, analyzed like a crime scene. But what they found next, that's where things get truly wild. When the first X-rays were done on the Antikythera mechanism, jaws literally dropped. Inside what looked like a crumbling piece of bronze were layer upon layer of intricately crafted gears, over 30 of them. That's not the kind of craftsmanship you expect from something made 2 millennia ago. It's the kind of design you'd find in a Swiss watch, not in the ruins of a shipwreck. That moment flipped the script. Suddenly, we weren't just dealing with some mysterious relic. We were staring at a machine. A real machine built by human hands, with a purpose so complex it forced scientists to rethink what ancient technology was even capable of. But let's break it down, because this wasn't just any machine. This ancient device could track eclipses, predict the phases of the moon, follow the paths of the planets, and even count down to the next Olympic Games. Think about that. All of this inside a bronze box that predates electricity by 1,900 years. And it worked, mechanically, flawlessly, like a time-bound oracle. It was basically an analog computer designed to map the sky with precision. And here's the kicker. It matched astronomical data with shocking accuracy. We're not talking about guesses. We're talking about deliberate, calculated movement. This thing didn't just simulate the movement of celestial bodies, it synchronized them. Each gear had a role, representing a heavenly object or a mathematical formula. Turned science into motion. That's why calling it the Antikythera mechanism almost doesn't do it justice. It's more like the missing link between ancient philosophy and modern engineering. What's crazy is how advanced this tool was compared to anything else from that era. At a time when most civilizations were still using sundials and shadows, this lost civilization had built a cosmic engine. Now here's what's truly humbling. It took us over 2,000 years to even begin to catch up. Not until the 14th century did Europe produce anything remotely close to this level of mechanical precision. And yet, some unknown genius in the ancient world had already cracked the code, literally building a mechanical universe. That raises the question, how does something that complex come out of nowhere? Where's the learning curve? The prototypes? The beta versions? It's like finding a rocket ship next to a caveman's campfire. It just doesn't add up. So how did this even exist? Was it really the work of one brilliant mind? Or was it the result of centuries of accumulated wisdom passed down, refined, and finally assembled into this one machine? Because nothing about it says accident. Everything about the Antikythera mechanism screams intentional design, purposeful, elegant, genius-level execution. We're not looking at trial and error. We're looking at mastery, which makes you wonder, if this is what they built, what else did they know? And the further researchers dug, the more they realized this wasn't just about astronomy. It was about understanding time itself, about syncing human activity with the rhythms of the cosmos. That idea that someone, thousands of years ago, built a machine to literally map the heavens opens a door. And what's behind that door? Well, that's where things start to get even weirder. Alright, let's simplify this whole ancient computer thing with something you can actually picture. Imagine two gears in front of you, one with 8 teeth and another with 16. Now, spin the smaller one once and watch the larger one rotate halfway. That's 8 by 2, right? That's the math happening in real time just through motion. This is the core idea behind a computer analogico, and that's exactly what the Antikythera mechanism was. It didn't need electricity. It didn't run on code. It ran on movement, ratios, and brilliant mechanical logic. Honestly, it's like ancient people built a calculator out of clock parts. Now think of those old grandfather clocks, the kind with swinging pendulums and gears that click in perfect rhythm. Imagine mixing that with celestial charts, lunar cycles, and the entire night sky. That's what this mechanism was. A cosmic clock with the soul of a scientist and the brain of a mathematician. It's wild how a few pieces of bronze could hold centuries of astronomical knowledge. But that's the magic of ancient technology. It's physical, tangible, and shockingly precise. No batteries, no screens. Just genius carved in metal. Let's go one step further. You know how people Google things to find answers about the stars, moon phases, or next eclipses? Well, 2,000 years ago, this machine was that Google. You'd turn a crank and it would tell you the positions of the planets, when the next solar eclipse would happen, and even which city would host the next Olympics. Sounds absurd, right? But that's the beauty of it. It did all that without wires, processors, or internet. This thing was the analog version of a search engine for the cosmos. The Antikythera mechanism wasn't just a tool. It was information, encoded in gears. Here's something worth thinking about. The more researchers reconstruct this machine, the more they find it behaves like a brain. Not a literal brain, of course, but a thought process turned physical. It doesn't just store data, it calculates, predicts, adjusts. It's like whoever built it wasn't just copying nature, they were conversing with it. You spin the gears and the stars respond. It's this eerie connection between human intelligence and universal rhythm. Almost like the universe had been translated into bronze. I once heard an engineer say that the Antikythera mechanism feels alive. And honestly, that tracks. It doesn't sit still, it moves, breathes, ticks. It's like you're watching the heartbeat of an idea that refused to be forgotten. It's that blend of motion and meaning that gives this device its magic. And maybe that's why it hits us so hard. Because deep down, it proves that knowledge isn't bound by time. It's passed on, sometimes in stories, sometimes in machines. But here's the kicker, if they could build something this sophisticated without modern tools, then where did they get the blueprint? Was it trial and error, or did this design come from somewhere else entirely? That's what we'll try to unravel next. When something this complex shows up out of the blue, one of the first questions that hits you is, who the heck made it? Some scholars believe it might have been designed by Archimedes himself, or at least by someone from his school of thought. Makes sense, right? The guy was basically the Einstein of his time. He didn't just think outside the box. He designed the box, folded it inside out, and turned it into a catapult. But even for Archimedes, this kind of engineering seems a little too ahead of the curve. That's where things start to get weird. What if the knowledge used to build the Antikythera mechanism didn't originate in Greece at all? What if it was inherited, passed down from a culture even older, one we barely even know about? There's a growing idea among independent researchers that lost civilizations may have left behind breadcrumbs, tools, artifacts, ideas that eventually made their way into the hands of those we credit with invention. Sounds far-fetched, I know, but history isn't a straight line. It loops, it folds, it forgets, and sometimes it hides. Just think about other out-of-place artifacts around the world. The Baghdad Battery, the Piri Reis map, the Iron Pillar of Delhi. Each one is a riddle that doesn't quite fit into the historical timeline. Now stack the Antikythera mechanism on top of that pile, and suddenly, the official version of history starts to look incomplete. It's like we're looking at chapter 7 of a book, but the first 6 chapters got burned. That's the unsettling part. We might not be the first advanced civilization to walk this earth. Some believe cataclysmic events wiped out earlier societies. Floods, volcanic eruptions, or even wars lost to time. In those moments of collapse, knowledge either disappears or hides. But once in a while, a piece survives, like this mechanism, tucked away in the sea for centuries, waiting to whisper the truth. And when it finally did, it didn't just whisper. It screamed. It screamed, "You don't know nearly as much as you think you do." I mean, come on, this wasn't some crude sundial. This was a machine with gear ratios based on lunar anomalies, solar cycles, and even planetary retrogrades. That kind of precision demands data, testing, observation over generations. It demands tradition, one that's either been lost or carefully buried. And if it's buried, who buried it? And why? And maybe the better question is, if knowledge like this could vanish once, how much more might we still be missing? Or worse, how much might be intentionally kept from us? Now here's where things get even more fascinating. When researchers started analyzing the Antikythera mechanism in detail, something jumped out. This thing didn't carry only Greek fingerprints. Elements of its design hinted at knowledge from Mesopotamia, Egypt, maybe even Syria. It was like someone had collected ideas from across the ancient world and fused them into one glorious bronze brain. That's not coincidence. That's collaboration. A kind of ancient think tank, if you will. One that challenges the notion of isolated civilizations inventing everything on their own. You know how today we talk about globalization? Turns out the ancient world had its own version of it, except instead of emails and Zoom calls, it was trade routes and scrolls. The Silk Road, the Phoenician sea routes, and other forgotten paths weren't just about moving goods, they were about moving ideas. Philosophy, astronomy, metalwork, navigation, it all flowed between cultures. The Antikythera mechanism might be proof of that invisible web. A kind of ancient internet powered by boats and language instead of fiber optics. There's also a high chance that this wasn't something your average citizen could get their hands on. This wasn't the ancient world's equivalent of a smartphone. It was more like a quantum computer locked in a private lab. Only the elite, astronomers, navigators, philosophers, or even kings would have had access to such a tool. And that tells you something. Knowledge wasn't just shared. It was curated, maybe even restricted. That's a big deal. It suggests there was a class of people who knew far more than they let on. Let me paint a picture. Imagine a scholar in Alexandria discussing lunar cycles with a priest from Babylon. They don't speak the same language, but they both look up at the same sky. That common ground leads to shared insights, scribbled notes, maybe even diagrams traded for spices or obsidian. And somewhere along that invisible bridge, someone gathers enough pieces to make a machine like Antikythera. It's not a leap, it's a mosaic. A beautiful, chaotic, cross-cultural masterpiece. What's wild is that this entire network of ancient wisdom might have been more organized than we think. There are hints, just hints, that secret societies or guarded libraries may have stored, protected, and passed down this kind of knowledge. The Library of Alexandria was likely just one hub in a larger system. And when pieces of that system fall, some knowledge slips through the cracks, or gets deliberately hidden. So if the Antikythera mechanism is just one surviving node in a massive ancient network, what else is still out there, waiting to be unearthed? Just when you think the story couldn't get any wilder, modern researchers decided to throw artificial intelligence into the mix. Yep, today's tech meeting, a 2,000-year-old relic. And guess what? It worked. By feeding scans of the Antikythera mechanism into advanced AI models, they uncovered details no human eye had caught before. Coordinates, gear alignments, hidden inscriptions, clues that had been sleeping under rust and time. It's like the machine had been holding its breath for 2 millennia, just waiting for someone to ask the right questions. One of the most shocking revelations? The mechanism might be pointing to the location of other devices. You heard that right. Buried within its components were encoded indicators, celestial alignments tied to specific regions on Earth. That's not coincidence. That's navigation. And some of those places, they're showing signs of metallic anomalies underground, which means this thing might not have been a one-off. Could have been part of a series, a whole ecosystem of ancient tech we haven't even scratched the surface of. Now imagine this. You're a researcher holding the blueprint to another machine, buried beneath layers of dirt and denial. But here's the twist. What if it wasn't lost by accident? What if these machines were deliberately hidden, to protect them or to protect us from them? That's the kind of question that doesn't get answered in textbooks. It hangs in the air, daring you to dig deeper. Because if someone went through the trouble of burying knowledge this powerful, they probably had a pretty compelling reason. It's a chilling thought, right? Like stumbling onto a sealed vault labeled, "Do not open," except the lock is rusted, and curiosity has already pried it halfway open. And here we are, peeking inside. AI, with all its brilliance and precision, is now playing detective in a mystery that began before electricity even existed. And it's doing more than translating metal, it's unraveling intent, purpose, design. In a way, AI isn't just reading the mechanism, it's communing with it. And there's another layer. The deeper we go, the more this machine seems to mirror us. It stores memory, predicts behavior. It adapts based on alignment. Sounds a lot like a human mind, doesn't it? Or maybe even a civilization's mind. It's as if someone out there long ago was trying to leave a version of themselves behind. Not in words or paintings, but in motion, math, and metal. And now, thanks to technology they never imagined, we're finally hearing what they had to say. But here's the final twist. What if this isn't the last message? What if there are more mechanisms out there, deeper, older, more powerful? And what if some of them were never meant to be found? So now the big question is, what do you believe? After everything we've uncovered, the forgotten genius, the buried networks of knowledge, the possibility of lost civilizations and ancient machines smarter than they had any right to be, it's hard to walk away unchanged. Maybe the Antikythera mechanism wasn't just a relic. Maybe it was a message, a challenge, a warning, the kind of thing that shakes your sense of history right down to the foundation. Because if they were capable of that, what else were they capable of? Have we underestimated the people who came before us? Or worse, has someone been underestimating us, hoping we wouldn't notice the breadcrumbs they left behind? This mechanism doesn't just mess with science, it messes with pride, with the illusion that progress only moves forward. It makes you realize that history isn't written in stone. It's scratched into bronze, buried under oceans, and whispered through gears. And now it's whispering to you. So what are you going to do with that whisper? Are you the kind of person who shrugs and scrolls? Or are you the one who starts digging, questioning, connecting dots that were never meant to be connected? Because this channel, Lost Origins, isn't just about stories. It's about awakening a mindset. The kind that doesn't accept easy answers. The kind that dares to believe there's more. And hey, if you've made it this far, you're already one of us. So here's the next step. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and, seriously, share this video with someone you know who's just as curious, skeptical, and fascinated by the unknown as you are. Help us grow this community of seekers, questioners, and deep thinkers. We're building something here, a space for real conversations about the mysteries that textbooks skip. So if you feel like you've just glimpsed behind the curtain, stick around. This is just the beginning.